All right, Monday night, the Stanley Cup Final begins. San Jose Sharks looking for their first Stanley Cup win. And, of course, the Pittsburgh Penguins looking for their first since 2009. Paul, I know you haven't shown a whole lot of interest in these NHL playoffs. They haven't done a lot for you. Does a Penguins-Sharks Stanley Cup Final do it for you?
Yeah, I think it does, Jonathan. I think that my interest level will be up for this one. You have some star power with Sidney Crosby. You have some great stories with Joe Thornton, never having won a cup before finally getting there. One of the things for me, though, is I like that there's two dedicated fan bases here. I think that what's a little bit underrated in Pittsburgh is they are a great sports town. But it's what's lost, in particular the Steelers' hysteria, is how strong a fan base the Penguins have. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Sharks fans, who I know maybe they don't expand too far outside of San Jose, but maybe they'll draw some more people in with that. So two good hockey markets. There's a lot of interesting stories between these two teams, and I can't really call a winner right now, which I think is great going into the final. That you can't say that one team is appreciably better than the other. Last year, I pretty much thought the Blackhawks would win it in a non-dramatic way, and they did. Same thing. I think the last few finals, really going back to Canucks and Bruins, they've been fairly predictable and they've gone the way we thought. I can't call that going into this one, so I am looking forward to it.
Okay. Ed, Pittsburgh has not had the easiest road to the final, but it's been said that the Sharks are in one of those zones that Stanley Cup winners get into. Are you seeing that from the Sharks? Is this a team that may... whose destiny may be winning the Cup?
Yeah, well, I think so, and I think there's a couple of things in play here. One of them is the West. I don't have the numbers on my fingertips, but by and large, the West has had more success in the Stanley Cup Final, I think, over the last decade. Obvious exception to 2011, of course. Two really interesting teams because the core of both of them have been around 7-8 years, which is an eternity in the NHL. This is really their first time for Pittsburgh. You have to go back to 2009, and for them to have a 7-year drought and then be back is amazing. San Jose should have been here, I don't know how many times, never made it. So they've kept the core intact, but they've revitalized their organization with depth moves and with new characters. Nobody had ever heard of, I think it's Brian Rust? Yeah. Do I have the name right?
Yeah.
And he is the star of Pittsburgh now. He was the star of their Game 7 win over Tampa. Jonas Donskoy, nobody had ever heard of him. Great player, great Finnish winger with it, who really completed the team. And there's similar characters on each team, so everybody's familiar with the core, with the Crosbys, the Malkins, and the Letangs, and Thornton, as Paul mentioned, and all the guys. But it's these other characters, I think, that really give this a little depth.
Two guys you didn't mention who are actually not that well known in the wider hockey circles are the two goalies. Martin Jones of Vancouver, of course, grew up here, plays for the Sharks. And, of course, Matt Murray, the rookie who nobody had heard of 2 months ago, backing up Marc-Andre Fleury, has now played essentially the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. Sort of flies in the face of the suggestion that an established goalie is going to lead you to a Stanley Cup. At the same time, we have countless examples of goalies who've kind of come out of nowhere and been red hot at the right time.
Yeah, I think we have long since established it is almost impossible to win the Stanley Cup when your goalie's your best player. He's got to be a piece of the puzzle, clearly, but you look at the Corey Crawfords and the Andy Niemis and the good goalies, but really not anybody you would build a team around. I think Marty Jones is an interesting case, and I know we've talked about him on this broadcast. The Canucks were in a position to draft him. All they had to do was invest a 7th rounder in a local kid who was playing in Calgary, who they should have had a book on, and they passed on him. Interesting, now they're both in the whitest hot of the spotlight right now, and this is the proving ground for goalies. I would give a slight edge to Jones just because he had a little taste of it with the Kings and he's been around that winning culture, but who knows.
Paul, last thing for you. Sidney, you've long been an advocate of an interesting idea, which is that Sidney Crosby was the greatest hero of the 2010 Winter Olympics. You've long advocated that there should be a statue, not just of a surrendering Canucks coach outside the arena, but of an icon, of a national icon, Sidney Crosby. How great is it that he's back in the biggest tournament of the year for all the marbles? And do you hope on some levels that Sidney Crosby can lift his second Stanley Cup?
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think I'd rather see Joe Thornton lift one. There's a freshness when I know Canuck fans, this stings for them a little bit, but it would be nice to see the Sharks, who've never won one before, win one. And that would actually say that all 3 teams in California have one before the Canucks even have one. However, yeah, I think with Crosby, we talked of him coming into the NHL of being, of the Gretzky-Lemieux level, and certainly had early success, won a Stanley Cup quite young, and that Olympic moment is iconic, Jonathan. There's no getting around that. But ever since then, whether it was the concussion issue or we almost take for granted that he's at the top of the charts, but the era of the NHL means he's not going to put those gaudy numbers up that would compare them from a career point of view to a Gretzky-Lemieux. What would? Well, I don't know. Maybe if he won another 2-3 cups, then you start to go, wow, yeah, this guy is in that category. So for Sidney Crosby's personal story, another cup, I think, just elevates him to another level and certainly keeps him in that conversation going forward with more cups. But it's not like he's a bad player, but as we stratify all-time greats, yeah, he's not in that upper echelon yet, and cups are the guy they're the one thing that will get him in that equation.
All right, well, the Sharks had a rough regular season at home, but the Shark Tank is usually a tough place to play. That's where they start Monday night for the Stanley Cup Final.